Hi everyone. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person to join you at the conference. However, the reason for that seems very appropriate given what I intended to talk about. My university have recently introduced an algorithmic timetabling system, and despite my initial teaching being scheduled for a Wednesday afternoon, it was then moved to accommodate other necessities to Friday afternoon, which made travel impossible. It's a small example of the way in which automation is orchestrating and changing university life. And what I intended to talk about is the many ways in which that might lead to a university that looks quite unlike the one that we are familiar with. At the heart of this analysis is generative AI. For most of us, this has tended to be encountered at the level of spectacle. I prepared this image using the DALL-E image generator and the poem about the automated university using ChatGPT. There's a certain pleasure to be found in these things, and it can be enjoyable to play with them. But I want to argue that the significance of generative AI goes far beyond this. It also goes far beyond OpenAI's ChatGPT. While it took me under 5 minutes to generate this text and image for my presentation, the real significance comes when those sorts of generative activities become not just an individualized entertainment, but something integral to the operation of the university. The spectacle has been important in ChatGPT becoming arguably the fastest growing web service of all time, and OpenAI have become one of the most sought after companies in the world. And while we should be cautious about the technological hype wave which has replaced the metaverse, Web 3.0 and crypto, we need to understand this in a political economic context, both in terms of technology and also the university system itself. There are certainly powerful interests concerned to maximise the perceived significance of generative AI, and there's a powerful grassroots preoccupation with the spectacle. But this focus on outputs, whether these are entertaining, useful or worrying, risks obscuring the way in which generative AI can supplement or replace existing activity. And it's this latter category, away from outputs, which I think are key to understanding what the automated university might look like. There has been an explosion in automation discourse over the last decade, and many would argue that this sense that robots are coming for our jobs is something we've seen at various points throughout capitalism. Ferendale and Jabari identify two prevalent scenarios in the automation discourse. The first, labour replacement, is where machines substitute for human labour. This has led to the partial or entire elimination of occupational roles, such as the lift operator, to cite their example. In contrast, labour-enabling scenarios involve human productivity being enhanced by machines, because routine aspects of a role, or the performance of non-routine aspects, are accelerated. So, for example, an academic writing with Microsoft Word rather than a typewriter, or an accountant using a spreadsheet. And this very timely analysis matches personal intuitions about the impact of generative AI, which can be encountered throughout the university. For some people, it's instinctively an opportunity to expand their productive and creative capacities. And I include myself in that category. On an individual level, I am very excited about this, and it's changed how I work. But there's another intuition, which is that it's a disruptive threat liable to cause more harm than good. And when I abstract from my own creative practice, this is how I see the future sociologically. And what I'm trying to do in my work at the moment is to imagine what these two scenarios will look like within universities. And I've actually found ChatGPT 4 a very helpful tool for mapping out these speculative visions. In the scenarios I'm developing, in Nova University, generative AI is used to automate routine processes. It frees up staff and students to focus on the things that really matters to them. And so it enhances the quality of the institution in a way which reflects human values. In contrast, in Solitude University, generative AI is used to replace human labour, handing over judgments within the university to the system itself. And in this project, I want to map these out in much greater detail to take a series of sociological assumptions in relation to the potential impacts of generative AI, in order to present a vision of what these two possibilities might look like if they become the dominant tendency for how automation, generative AI in particular, could transform the university. In drawing this contrast, I am fully aware that the reality is likely to be somewhere in between these two extremes. But there are many near future pathways to automation within universities, which we're already seeing. And the moral panic surrounding assessment integrity is particularly problematic because I think it obscures these much more pressing questions about how individual practice, voluntarily embraced by academics and support staff and managers and students, as well as the broader institutional forms that automation could take, are likely to build up from their present slow start. And we encounter things that are real and viable and plausible solutions to existing problems within the university system. There are objections that could be raised to each of these, but there are cases that could be made for them simultaneously to triage student support and outreach through chatbots, to reduce the load of meetings through the organisation and follow-ups being automated, to use generative AI to renew existing teaching materials, to generate marking materials based on programme content, to reduce marking load by grading assessments and exams using predefined rubric, and providing descriptive summaries of feedback and surveys. I'm not trying to make a case for any of these because I think there are real reasons for caution with every single one of them. But what I want to get across is the bureaucratic plausibility of each of these, and to raise the question of where they might lead cumulatively as we move into a more automated future. And the reason for that caution is the broader political economy of higher education. There was a great piece on the 1KHE blog earlier on this year, jointly written by the York Vice-Chancellor and York University and College Union. Speaking of the UK university system, they said that we are grappling with a broken funding system which systematically underfunds the true costs of both home undergraduate teaching and research and leaves us reliant on other unstable funding sources. Of course, anyone familiar with the UK sector will know that these cracks have grown rapidly due to declining real value of student fees, double-digit inflation, and the rising cost of borrowing. The system is at financial breaking point, and there's very little hope of a new political settlement, even with the coming end to Tory rule. And my concern is this creates an economic incentive to explore how generative AI can be used to cut costs, rather than freeing up staff for creative work, even if the implementation process would prove to be much more complicated than imagined. And so what I'd like to do by developing evocative, sociologically rich, and scientifically plausible scenarios of where this could end up in extreme cases is to present a vision of where this might lead, because I think it could be an imaginative resource that could stimulate and orientate questions of the governance of generative AI within higher education, which we urgently need to ask. And so I hope this is an interesting, or at least helpful, contribution to the panel discussion about the futures of higher education. And I wish I could be there in person to actually converse with you about this, but I'm glad that I was invited to offer this video instead. Thanks very much.